In column G of this worksheet called approximate, we need to look up the tax rate for this salary. Without knowing how Excel or Excel's functions operate here, just using your day-to-day knowledge of how we tend to work with tables, the salary of $41,639 as we're looking at the tax table here in columns J and K, $45,000 is too big. This salary hasn't reached that. So most people, as they look at this, would say, well, I guess the tax rate would be 6%. And we're not going to get into any issue of prorating here. We want to use Excel's VLOOKUP function here to look up information, for example, from cell F2, and look vertically in the left column of a table. By definition, VLOOKUP means search vertically in the left column of a table. The table might be on this worksheet, in another worksheet, or in another workbook. Then the VLOOKUP function gives us the opportunity to tell it which column has the answer. So the table is not just the left column, of course, but the other column and possibly another and another column. What we'd like to be able to do here as quickly as possible is show how the VLOOKUP function will find information. Nothing will work smoothly if this information is not in ascending order. There are two basic kinds of VLOOKUPs. The one we're talking about now is what we sometimes refer to as an approximate match, meaning we're not trying to find this number exactly in the table. We don't see that number there, but it certainly falls between two others. And because it hasn't reached this level, we want our answer to be 6%. And for the next person here, makes 56,469, hasn't reached this level, therefore it's going to be 8%. Now, VLOOKUP essentially does all the work. If we're trying to describe this function as intuitive, that's really not very close. This isn't really intuitive, but it's relatively straightforward. I'm going to type it, and we'll also introduce the concept here, or the idea that perhaps a range name should be used with this. The information is structured in the appropriate way. Anytime you're trying to use VLOOKUP for an approximate match, the information must be in ascending order if you hope to get coherent answers. The other columns might not be, but certainly many times, as in this case, they are also. So in cell G2, we can simply start with equal VLOOKUP. Left parenthesis. The first portion of this is the value we're trying to look up. It's cell F2, comma, the table array, these yellow cells here, comma. The next pop-up choice, column index number, isn't nearly so obvious, but it means the second column of the table in this case. We want to get our answers out of the second column. Now, we're not using an exact match here, so we don't need this fourth argument that's referred to as range lookup. So we're not trying to do an exact match here. The function is complete. We'll just press Control-Enter here, and there's the answer. It is 6%, as you would have expected. Hasn't reached this value, it's above 35,000, the answer is 6%. If we hope to be able to copy this down the column, I think a lot of you would know here that we need to make the reference to the table here absolute. So certainly one way to do this would be to highlight the address of the table, press F4 to make it an absolute reference, Control-Enter again, then we can copy this down the column either by dragging or double-clicking. And so we have correct answers. And of course, you always want to be checking out one or two of them. In every case here, that reference to the table has remained constant or absolute. In a strict sense, nothing wrong with this, but if we give this table a range name, it's going to provide better documentation and make the function easier to use. We'll simply highlight these cells. Fastest way to apply a range name here is to the left of the formula bar in the name box. We'll click the drop arrow and type the range name. The range name ideally describes what we're doing. It cannot contain spaces, so tax table right there. We see that in J2, but that's just coincidental. I happen to put the name there because that's what it should be called. Tax table, no spaces. You can use underscore. You can shift case in here. You cannot begin a range name with a number. Makes good sense to use the name, though. Let's go back to our first function in G2. Instead of using this, why not use tax table? You can either type this or press F3 to get a list of them, or possibly simply highlight the cells in question. And if a name has been applied there, the name pops into the function. We can re-enter this, recopy it. It's a lot easier to read. If you encounter this and didn't know where tax table was, you could easily click the drop arrow over here, highlight the phrase tax table, and there it is. The beauty of this, of course, is if we make the percentage changes in column K, we don't have to rewrite any of the functions. They automatically adjust. If you need to make changes to the tax table, if you tack items onto the end, that's not the best way to do this. If somehow the breakpoints start to change and we have more levels, it's better to insert from within. If it starts to get too unbearable there, you might have to redesign the entire table. But if we wanted to add more, always insert from within, then you don't have to reassign the range name. But there's no question this is fast and efficient. Once again, the tables could be in different worksheets or in different workbooks. It could be much, much longer than this, and there are even situations where you have multiple columns. VLOOKUP doesn't provide a good paper trail in the sense that it doesn't really tell you what it's doing. So if you only use it occasionally, you might want to take your time every time you use it. But there's no question that it's efficient and fast, and it certainly is much, much better than a long, complex, ridiculously unwieldy if function. So it's a great tool to have to look up information from a table.